Hello, and welcome to Haggis Hunting, where we do a deep dive on a topic that really deserves further investigation and sometimes a little bit of goofiness. I'm Eric.
I'm Rocky.
I'm Ian.
And today I want to ask you guys about the broad topic of tradition. Tradition. So, we obviously, in our business, we are steeped in it. We would not be... Yes, immersed. We would not be doing what we do if it weren't for the fact that Highland Dress exists as a tradition. So what does that really mean? How deeply do people on average do you think about it? How long does something have to be around to constitute being a tradition? And how much do we let it be our master or our servant? And I'm kind of leading the witness a little bit with that phrasing, I admit, but I just want to kind of brainstorm about what we think it means to us and what it's meant to the business and to the culture.
Tradition is kind of like a vampire that way. There is the master and then the servants.
Or Sith.
There you go.
Always are. I don't know.
If you kill the one, all the rest of them disappear.
Well, it's funny because there actually is an old there's an old anecdote that says tradition is the democracy of the dead. I've also heard it as tradition is the tyranny of the dead.
Okay.
But the point is, by acknowledging traditions, you are basically giving a fair voice to people who are no longer here.
Yeah, and that can be both to honor them, or it can be people using the dead to punish you with their idea of what society should look like. So I take both points.
Yeah, to tie your shoelaces or hamstring you kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So where does a tradition start? How does a tradition begin? This is going super broad.
The first time it's done.
But
it's not yet tradition, of course.
The obvious
Right.
thing.
That's the thing. I think it's the first time somebody gets nostalgic for how things were in the past. It's the first time somebody says, I really liked how things were back then.
I think nostalgia certainly reinforces even if it doesn't cause it. It's both maybe in different degrees for different specific traditions, but
I don't think I kind of like you splitting the difference. I don't think nostalgia causes tradition, but nostalgia carries it forward.
Keeps it going.
Correct. The tradition starts with more of a this is the way we've done it for a couple years. It starts with something that was fun, and then you want to do it again, and you want to do it again. You form a habit of it, whether it's a date on a calendar, or whether it's something that your family does every weekend, or whether it's just the way that you wear a certain style of clothing or whatever it is.
I don't think it even has to be fun per se. I think it has to be
important.
Perceived as a good idea. There's a reason we did it this way. It worked. We should keep doing it because we know it works. So in that sense, I think you could argue that tradition is by its very nature conservative.
Yeah.
You don't feel a need to invent anything new because the original idea is working just fine.
Yeah.
And that means it's either working practically, like this is how we've always threshed the field,
Yeah.
or it's working from an emotional standpoint.
Or to tie it to clothing the way I'm sure we're getting to.
Oh, yeah.
Like it might be that you wore particular clothes because they were practical for your field that you worked in, whether it's literally a field or, your profession. But it becomes tradition even beyond perhaps its usefulness.
Practical or looks good aesthetically.
Yes, or combination.
Correct. If you mix certain colors together, they work. There's reasons why they work. You can get into that science or art, as it were. And then there's reasons why things don't work so well together.
And I think we will definitely circle around to that because there are things that I know we all feel have become traditional for not the best of reasons. And I think sometimes there is a groupthink aspect to tradition. I think there's also a accidental component to tradition.
Can be.
That we didn't mean for this to be something that sticks around, but it's sticking around.
Yeah.
I think it has to do with self-esteem also. I think that when we're not talking about the practical stuff like this is how you thresh a field. I think we're talking about stuff that makes you feel either proud or nostalgic. Again, I still think that comes into play fairly
Connected
early.
to your ancestors.
Yeah, or an identity to separate you from them, the big capital T them.
Yeah.
You know, it could be the people on the other side of the hill. It could be a national thing. It could be, you know, somebody else's family, you know, whatever. But it becomes it's a personal identifier, I think also. Of all of those different possibilities, what do you think is the most important factor in Highland dress? Which one do you think has really kept Highland dress around?
The beginning is separating us from them. Mm-hmm. That's where it evolved from. Mm-hmm. And then with, you know, in the 1820s, 1830s, it was more of a, hey, that's cool, we want to do it too. And then it became a broader thing with lowlanders wearing it, and, you know, the king obviously in his visit wearing it. Mm-hmm. So that's where it kind of, to me, that's a step in the process. Potentially early on is the identifier / separator, tribalism, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. I think tribalism is definitely an appropriate
or can be
term.
Yeah.
Tribalism can be either a positive or a negative thing. Mm-hmm. We tend to use it more as a negative term in recent history, but it's a factor. It's because humans are social animals, and I think the resistance to change is evidenced in what you were just talking about. Because I think it was it Sir Walter Scott or was it somebody else? There were people who started there was a backlash against lowlanders wearing tartan back in those days, right?
Yeah,
it's like that's not their thing. They didn't grow up like we did.
I don't think it was Sir Walter Scott, but yeah, there was a backlash, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So how did they get over that?
Still see people today who turn their nose up. Oh, that's a lowland clan. You shouldn't be wearing a kilt. It's rare and it's from, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How did they get over it? They just did it.
Yeah.
It's just powering through of, nope, I'm taking ownership of this thing now, of this symbol now. I'm going to do this and I'm not going to stop. And then a broader acceptance of the thing, whether that's other people, like let's use lowland, you know, families as an example.
Okay.
A lowland family saying, nope, you know, I'm going to wear this tartan, period. It exists. You know, the Sobieskis made it up, but it's fine. So I'm now going to do it. And the family of that people or of that guy does it. And then it just grows and grows and grows. And as long as they keep doing it, and as long as there's a broader acceptance through wanton usage, it just becomes begrudgingly potentially, but accepted overall of, nope, it's a thing now. And you're right, Ian. There are some, you know, people who will, even to this day, like, oh, well, no, lowland families don't really have a tartan. They shouldn't really. Well, you know what? Highland families didn't really have their own clan tartans before, you know, the 1700s either.
Yeah.
So how long does it have to be, and this is the kind of the point of the discussion, how long does it have to be a thing before it's considered traditional or not traditional?
I think when people express that kind of point of view today, they're kind of like picking the time period that they want to like draw a line at.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Or the group. But
yeah, for sure. And I think going back to the tribalism thing, I think when you do that, when you define your tribe, I think it's a healthy thing when it's looking inward and saying these are my people, and thinking how we relate to each other and how we create community. It becomes negative when it looks outward, not those people. Those people are not my tribe. And if there's fear attached to it as well, like the people over the hill or the little green men on the moon, that's the dividing line. Looking inward versus looking outward.
I would agree. If you can use it as a way to boost your self-esteem and to give you a sense of roots, a sense of place, then it can be very healthy. If you use it as a cudgel, then not so much. So I totally agree.
I think what I've come to love about the Kilts and Culture group, if you want to perceive that as a sort of tribe, just, you know, people coming together over love of culture and a particular style of dress, to see them lift each other up, looking inward at each other, that's positive. Not to say nothing negative has ever happened there.
All the comments we had on the New York trip were just like how great it was to be part of the group virtually, but much, much cooler to actually see people in person.
Yeah.
You know, really, you know, be able to spend time with people face to face and feel like you're part of something larger than yourself.
Yeah.
And to your point, you're looking inward versus outward. There's always, in these types of things, there's always a temptation, if you will, to draw a circle to include yourself in the circle, or, shut the door behind me. So I am part of this group, but other people aren't.
Yeah.
So it depends on the desires, the thought process of the individual of, are you coming from a place of inclusivity or exclusivity? Is there a reason why you want to join the group that's nefarious, or is it because you just love these people in the group so much?
Yeah.
Going back to your example earlier about lowlanders, could it be argued that that was appropriation? Were they forcing themselves into a tradition that actually wasn't originally theirs?
Well,
I'm playing devil's advocate here.
Understood.
Because obviously I don't think that's the case. But
yeah, I would, if that argument is made, ish potentially, but at the same time, it wasn't far removed from it not being a real thing. If you let's say, okay, so Sobieski's wrote the Vestiarium Scoticum in 1842, and the King's Visit was 1822, and around that time, holy crap! Look at me remembering dates for the record.
Good for you.
Writing this down on the calendar.
you.
So it's
What
only
day is it now? Do you even know?
That'd be another date we have to remember.
It's May 12th. So the if you look at it that way, it's only a 20-year time period where the king wore a tartan, and a lot of clan chiefs were, kind of instructed, you're supposed to wear your official clan tartan, and they kind of, not all of them, some of them had them, not too many. They all kind of rushed to say like, okay, I need one. I need an official tartan. And then they gave it their old Hanukkah blessing. So if you're going to say that, lowlanders are appropriating, they're appropriating essentially 20 years of culture, not hundreds of years. Now, because of the mists of the origins of the kilt are so, nebulous, there's no, okay, this is when the first guy wore the kilt. This is the first clan tartan registered. This is the first thing. It was just kind of an evolution. So to say that it would be appropriation would be, to me, a bit much of lowlanders appropriating Highland culture. You could make the argument, but I'd say it's a bit much.
What about Americans?
Dun, dun, dun. Well, the diaspora. Let's go broader. Let's
go.
Let's lump Canadians into this.
And Australians.
Those damn Australians.
Damn, and those Kiwis.
Exactly. I know.
They're like concentrated Australians.
Yeah.
Australian concentrate.
The thing that I love thinking about, and I love the way it was kind of, it turned a light switch on in my brain at one point, was somebody talking about how, the difference between the diaspora and the Scots who are in Scotland and, people of Scottish lineage is we're cousins, but there was a split in our family trees. And a lot of that was through Highland clearances, or in the case of the Irish, potato famine, that kind of thing. And when they left or were forced to leave, whether it was to Australia, whether it was to the North Carolina mountains, whatever it was, those people took their culture and their heritage with them.
And importantly, traditions.
And traditions. Yes, exactly. Thank you. Bringing it back on point. Whereas the people in Scotland, it could be said that the people who left were forced to leave. They were the strongest in those traditions, which is why they were, put out. And then the people who remained are the ones that kind of accepted and wanted to blend in to the rest of the society at that point. So it kind of not necessarily a watering down, that's saying it too strongly, but it is a homogenization to some degree of Great British culture, if you will, versus those who left and kind of tried to keep older traditions alive. So there was a split within it, which is why it's kind of evolved separately, and which also goes to the point of why Americans look at it through a lens of, I'm celebrating my heritage and my family, versus Scots today who don't understand that mentality because they've grown up with it. They're steeped in it ever since they were young, that, tartan's been part of the background. So it's never been something, air quotes, special, because it's just always been there, where it's much more rare in America or in Australia to see a kilt than it would be, or to see tartan than it would be in Scotland. Is that a fair assessment, or have I gone too far in my thoughts?
I think that's
fell
fair.
asleep.
I don't think it describes even most Americans and their approach to tartan, because I think a lot of people are discovering tartan within the last decade or two. It wasn't something I grew up. I didn't grow up around my parents. You know, I didn't at the time I got married, I didn't even know which clan I was associated with.
Mr. Anderson.
But it's something I came to, and I think it's a function of Americans have been so mobile throughout the country. There's been several different movements throughout our country's relatively short history where people have scattered all over. I know my parents moved to this area when they were pregnant with me, so I've never really had family in the area. A lot of them were in the Chicago area, but they've even scattered everywhere since. And that was after previous scatterings that kicked people in my family in different directions. So I think for a lot of people, they're finding kilts and or tartan and or traditions and culture that they didn't grow up with, but are trying to feel more connected to family trees that they feel disconnected from.
Yes.
Whereas in Scotland, it's probably a little bit more common for people to, yep, I lived in this town, my dad lived in this town, my grandfather and his great-great-grandfather all lived in this town. Maybe not in the same house, but
I think there's definitely something to that, and we've touched on this in various ways in various venues in the past, that basically the diaspora is more passionate about it because they don't have the immediate connection. It's not in their backyard.
Yeah.
So they don't take it for granted quite the same way.
They didn't learn about Scottish history in their elementary school.
Yeah.
There's a case to be made that they don't learn enough about Scottish history in their elementary schools in Scotland.
I don't know much about that, but fair enough.
I forgot what I was going to say. Completely lost my train of thought.
And I'm just getting lost in your dreamy eyes.
They're watering because I'm tired. It's allergies. Lipid pools of tears. Because pollen is my enemy. So anyway, cut that out. Edit all that out.
Nah, keep it.
So is a tradition at its strongest an abstraction? Is it an ideal and therefore you can't ever do it perfectly? Or is that mean that it's only going to survive if it's locked into something very specific? Or is it you have the ideal as a compass point and you can play around with it as long as you're like pointing at that North Star as you go?
It's a living, breathing thing.
It should be at least.
Yes.
I think the one we're talking about certainly is.
Yes.
Yeah, if we're speaking broadly about tradition vaguely, then different traditions fall on a spectrum of this, I think.
I would agree.
But
If it is expected to survive, it must be a living, breathing thing. It must evolve to some degree. If every single kilt, let's use kilts. If every single kilt, if you want to say that traditionally kilts are hand sewn, and every single kilt needs to be hand sewn, the industry would collapse. There would not be enough people with enough means to be able to buy enough kilts that are all hand sewn. The hire industry in Scotland would obviously prop it up to some degree, but hiring a kilt would be much more expensive. All these things would be much more expensive. It needs the influx to some degree of machine sewn kilts, and dare I say it, even less expensive kilts as a gateway drug, if you will, to get people into experiencing the tradition at a reasonable, air quotes again, reasonable price, affordable price, so that they can progress to the place where they want a nice hand sewn kilt or a really nice kilt or whatever. So even if it's machine sewn, really nice kilt. So you need different points of entry and different levels to be able to bring people into it, to get kids into it, to get people interested in it who otherwise wouldn't, because let's play it out. If everything has to be hand sewn, A, it's all going to be much more expensive. B, the mills, so there won't be as many being sold. So the mills won't be selling as much cloth. Maybe they'd still do it for upholstery and things, but there wouldn't be selling nearly as much. Therefore, there'd be less choices. And then if any one of those choices goes away, then there's zero choices. And then it just, poof, gone.
Yeah.
So it kind of implodes for lack of support. So you need a broader base to support the thing and different price points to get people into that broader base.
Yep.
What if you reach a point where nobody wants to have that hand sewn kilt? Is a tradition a ship of Theseus?
That is the risk you run. It is steering a course between, speaking of ships, steering a course between two cliffs. Mm-hmm. It's, if you get too close to either shore, you crash. Mm-hmm. So you don't want to go so far towards the low end that everything is just cheap and cheerful, air quotes, or Scottishisms, just cheap and cheerful, and then all the upper end stuff dies out. At the same time, you don't want everything to be unattainable financially, so that it will die out in that way. You have to have both. It is a yin yang. It is a middle course, as much of life is.
So how much right do you have to say, I don't like this tradition anymore, I want to change it?
As an individual?
Yeah.
You have all the right in the world.
I want to do something new. I want to try something new.
I'll let Ian go.
Depends on how strong of a personality you have.
We all have
what's your level
pretty
of
strong personalities in this room. But,
and what's your level of independence from your community? How much is a tradition, speaking of more of like a physical community than a cultural community, if you do something different, are you out, are you cast out literally? You know what I mean? What is the level of tradition we're talking about? Yeah.
That can be. Oh, go ahead.
I'm going further into fashion. Fashion always bastardizes the hell out of tradition, period. They play with it. It's a plaything to fashion. So you can go that far where you're just literally, lampshade tartan, hats that everyone's wearing. So that's never going to be accepted in tradition.
Soon to usakilts.com.
Yeah. No, for the love of God, no.
Now with USB charging LEDs.
Yes, Rocky approved. No, shoot me.
Sorry, folks, can't get it in 16 ounce. Only 11 and 13.
But it's you can go in that direction. Fashion does it all the time. As an individual, I'm fine with anyone doing it. It's back to how strong of a personality are you? How much validation do you need from your peers versus how much of a lone wolf are you? Are you, is there anyone else in your area that wears a kilt? No. Okay, great. Then do whatever you want to do and walk around, not within reason. You can, because you're not going to be ostracized from the kilt community anymore, because if you don't have a community and a support group around you. And everyone can play with it to a degree. It's just, it's back to the old art school thing. You have to know the rules before you break the rules. Yeah. So if you know you are breaking the rules and you choose to do it, you're not you could try to be starting a new tradition, but your degrees of success will be on how good or bad the look is.
And whether it catches on.
Yeah.
I think that's, it's whether or not you succeed.
Sometimes there's a look and it looks great, but only that guy can pull it off. You know what I mean?
Fair.
We recently got in a very special jacket for somebody. It's a Sheriff Muir. I've never been overly fond of the style of Sheriff Muir jackets, but this one was a Buchanan antique tweed Sheriff Muir.
I was looking at it when you had it down there.
And it was cool.
I love it.
And the guy put it on and I didn't see it, but some of the store folks that were helping him said he looked amazing in it. Part of me wants to do it, but I also don't know what I'd wear it to.
Yes, exactly that.
Like the Sheriff Muir is a very formal style for very formal events, but then a tweed tartan is not that formal of a look. So I don't know what to do with it. I'm sure he looks great. I'm not going to discourage him in any way, but I don't know that I want to follow.
I think you can totally do
pick
it for
up
a
his
burn
tradition
supper or whatever. I think, just like back in the 80s, well-heeled, well-to-do people started wearing blue jeans, and suddenly the pants of the working man was like high fashion for people who were spending like hundreds of dollars on a pair of jeans. So I'm sure that there's a certain area of events where you could totally wear that.
Yeah.
The problem,
and you'd be pushing the envelope.
I go to events like that though.
Okay. Yeah.
The problem that I had, Matt Newsom, I remember seeing photos of him. He has a gray tweed, either Sheriff Muir or something like that as well, or Kenmore, I don't know, some kind of fancy doodad jacket. And
add that category to the website, fancy doodad jackets.
Exactly. And I thought the same thing back then. I'm like, it looks really good. Where the heck would I wear it? And that's when you get into the artsy kind of looks. Like John McPhee from the Doobie Brothers got a regimental, or not a regimental, a Kenmore doublet or something. And whereas
on stage, different kind of context.
Exactly. If you have a rock star vibe to you, or you dress a little avant-garde, or people are always like, hey, that's a neat outfit. If people are complimenting you on your taste in weird looking outfits.
It's basically me.
But that's it's one of those where you can get away with it, but you have to be a bit eccentric to and own it, period, and recognize that it's not tradition. It's your slant on tradition.
Mm-hmm. Now I want to see Piper Alley in a tartan tweed sheriff muir. I think she could pull it off.
Okay, call her up. You get her to buy one, and then sure. All right. Well then. Explain to me why ghillie brogues are still around then. I mean, what even are ghillie brogues? Because that's a whole nother. Because I think
let's take a step back here. What really are shoes while we're at it?
Yes. Why do people need feet? I think that's the real question. No, I mean, because we talked about how tradition will start with something that's practical or works for people back in a day, and it also looks good, so people want to hang on to it for a variety of reasons. But I think then you have people layering stuff on to traditions. And sometimes it's layering on stuff which is a way of ossifying it, like saying, okay, we got to codify this somehow, because people are watering it down too much. And it's not going to look like the traditional thing that we're trying to emulate anymore if they keep watering it down. We know people will make that argument. But then you also have things that get invented and somehow work their way in and really have no good reason to exist. Okay. So where do things like ghillie brogues or kilt pins fit into this? I mean, it's like,
I'll add a couple more. And they go right to your point. If you look at when the Wells Tartan Center started doing doing Welsh kilts. Actually, it was before them that they had started existing. They bought the collection, but then they started doing all the accessories. And in discussions with them, it was like, why are all your accessories gold? Well, because we don't want them to be the same as all the Scottish accessories. Or why, when you look at, the Brian Boru jacket and vest and the evolution of that from an update on the Prince Charlie to no one buying it in the rental industry because they already had their Prince Charlie model. And then they said, okay, well, fine. Well, let's give it an Irish name and give it an Irish buttons and an Irish slant. That way it's distinctly different from the Scottish variations. So I think that's part of what it is people like that who... Well, I guess it's not always, but sometimes it can be people who say like, well, I don't want to screw up what is there, so I'm going to do something a little bit different and try to make it a new and slight angle on the tradition versus trying to like change the jacket or change the shoes or change the whatever. So instead of, buckle brogues have existed for a long time and they've been around. They are very, very traditional. And then somebody at some point said, you know what? I don't like buckle brogues. And God bless that man. Because I don't like him.
Build a statue in our front parking
yes,
lot.
I may. Don't tempt me.
We need to figure out who he was. That'll be our hurdle here.
Yes, we'll just anonymous.
That'll be the only thing that stops us from spending $10K plus on a bronze statue.
So buckle brogues existed as a piece of history and still exist. But at some point somebody said, I want a different kind of shoe. And they took, essentially just regular day brogues and then, chopped out the tongue, put long laces, had a bit of marketing shtick about how that's kind of harkens back. It's a crossover between the old, bog style shoes where it's like one piece of leather and super long laces so you don't get your foot stuck in the mud or your shoe stuck in the mud when you pull your foot out. And he said, okay, I'm going to do something like that. And that's going to be my marketing effort around it if I'm going to use my marketing brain. And it's wholly different from buckle brogues. So it can be a new thing. And he didn't try to put longer laces on the buckle brogues. He did something different. I'm assuming it was a he. I have no idea. And this is just straight conjecture.
Okay.
I do not know.
No, but let me play with that idea a little bit. I'm going to put on my ultra elite traditionalist hat. Also, my family is from Germany and we take our national dress seriously, unlike you Scots. And no one has tried to modify or update or make fashionable lederhosen. It is our national dress. It is what you wear when you go to events, and that's all it is. You keep trying to make money off of it, and therefore you are watering down the tradition because you are trying to just make a buck.
Well,
and you are manufacturing tradition, which is a term which gets bandied about a lot with Highland Dress and Scotland in general.
Every tradition, yes, it gets bandied about, correct. Every tradition was manufactured at some point, whether it was from an individual, whether it was a natural evolution, whether it was a company who said, hey, here's a thing, and started offering it to the market, and then it just caught on. It's manufactured. Mm-hmm. It almost doesn't, to some degree it matters entirely who manufactures it. And in other ways, it doesn't matter at all, because if it is accepted and if it moves forward, then it is what it is. And I would say this to you, Mr. German lederhosen traditional wearer.
I'll give you a better cultural example if you want, but go ahead.
No, I looked into buying lederhosen at one point.
Dear.
There's all kinds of schlock out there.
Oh yeah. It's in every culture. Like there are still, traditional lederhosen. My neighbor Kurt wears lederhosen. He does the Oktoberfest every year. He does a lot of different German stuff. There are more expensive and less expensive. There are made in Germany. There are made in China. There are, we have our kilt towels for the beach. There are lederhosen bathing trunks. So there are different levels of, price points and costume versus tradition within it, even cross-culturally.
But that's not what I'm talking about.
Okay, then.
Have they invented a new German accessory just so somebody can imbue it with meaning and make more money?
I would say
because the ghillie brogues don't need to exist. They really don't. Okay, from a standpoint of tradition, they are not something that people wore. A modern leather wingtip type shoe with ultra long laces that you tie around your ankle is not a historical artifact. Okay, it was invented, and then somebody said this is to represent. We did this as an homage to this old thing.
And
do you really need to do that for a national dress, for a traditional dress?
And it may have been created by one person, literally manufactured. Mm-hmm. But it could have, there's an alternate timeline here where people looked at it and went, yeah, that's dumb. And they just never accepted it. We never even know, us in the room, we never even heard about it in this alternate timeline.
Agreed.
But it got accepted. And that's the important aspect of tradition. Do people accept it? Do they adopt it? Mm-hmm. I would say, I think when people are, especially the type of kilt wearer, I'm not talking about like the serial kilter who wears a kilt every day, but the type of person who puts it on twice a year for weddings only. The kilt is special. It's unique. It's only worn for those special occasions. So I need the other pieces that are special and unique to this to put the whole thing together. And that might be the kernel that caused people to accept it, especially when you consider you have a jacket that's cut very uniquely. You have to approach your whole pocket situation very differently than you do with your pants. I sometimes have people looking for like, okay, what's different about this tuck shirt that's cut for a kilt? No, at the end of the day, it is pretty much just a tuck shirt. You could wear it with your pants too. Not everything here is like just exactly so for a kilt, but they're looking for it sometimes. And if you offer it, like in the case of the ghillie brogues would be my guess, is it got accepted.
I would also, I like where you're going with this. I would also draw this parallel as well. You don't see a lot of lederhosen, back to the Germany thing. I'm stuck there. You don't see a lot of lederhosen, in Germany. Laserhosen, yes.
Coming USA Kilt stuff.
Tron version of laserhosen, yes. Shoot you in your pants, lasers. This is off. So you don't see a lot of lederhosen in Germany that I'm aware of, outside or in the U.S. of people of German descent outside of Oktoberfest. So it's relegated to,
and Summerfest
events. But
again, events, special
but it's
occasions
not
only.
but it's not daily wear. You don't have like a hearty revival of people trying to bust out their lederhosen and saying, you know what, I'm going to wear this to the supermarket today because I want to, because it's part of my heritage and it's fun and people love talking to me about it. There isn't that same thing in many. Well, I don't know. I'll put it the other way. There is that in kilts. There is a desire to have, you know, a daily wear type expression, as well as save it for traditional. There's sort of both. And if you want to save it for weddings and special events, then you're going to be probably lean more towards the traditional. If you want to wear it more often, then you're probably going to have a bunch of stuff in your wardrobe. And some of it's going to lean traditional, some of it's going to lean casual or like experimental, shall we say. Because at some point you get bored with the traditional stuff and you don't want to stay in the box and you want to add your own personal thing to it.
That one, going back to a previous layer in this conversation, that one person who really wants to break with the tradition, whether it's expanding it in a shocking way or denying it, and does that carry forward? Wow, I completely lost my train of thought.
Yeah,
it went away.
It's really,
dude.
Yeah. But to pick back up, it's does it get accepted?
Yeah,
and how long does it take? So let's take that. Okay, so that was the end of your thought. Great. Next question. How long does it take for something to be around before you can call it traditional?
Yeah, versus a trend or a fad.
Correct. Now, again, I think you made the point earlier. It depends on the time frame you're drawing the line under. Saying, you're saying, 1822? Are you saying 1900? Are you saying 1940? Where are you drawing your personal line? And what is long enough?
Or is it time, or is it acceptance in the here and now?
But like, let's say ghillie shirts or Jacobite shirts.
Jacobite shirts.
Yeah, they're not traditional. They're a fabrication in the 1950s. So is that traditional now that it's been around for 70-ish years?
Now, you know what I've said in the past about this.
Or is it still, does it fall outside of that? Like when we're in the Kilts Culture group, we have, there's a weird discussion amongst the mods back when we first started the group of what is politics versus what is history. And the general rule of thumb, very broad, that we use for that discussion is 100 years. If something is over 100 years old, we can consider it history. If it's less than 100 years, it probably falls into politics. So that then becomes, we can kind of apply it to this.
Well, let's fight about where that line is. I think it's 20 years.
Tradition versus fad.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
You could say that, yeah.
So we recently had a customer of ours make a big splash with a tartan jacket and vest. Our customer David with his American Dream, and it's beautiful.
And his cowboy hat.
If a bunch of people saw that and said, "Man, that looks sharp. I really want to do that," and we see if we were to see a growth in that, and more people are doing it, and 10 years from now it's still growing. I don't know if you could call it a tradition yet, because it could just be a trend that carried from maybe 100 years from now. People are like, from like the early 2020s to the early 2030s, this was really big, and then it just died one day.
You can also point to tartan jackets and vests with or without a kilt going back to Victorian times.
Yeah.
And pre.
Because they do.
Yes.
Correct.
Certainly he's not the first ever. I didn't mean to imply that.
No,
but he could start a new trend.
I know you're not saying
a trend,
that.
or is that just this is a trend? At that
Or
point.
It's not even a trend yet, but
Or is it a cycle of fashion? Because it's not the same cut. It's a regular men's or a kilt jacket cut as we would know it today versus something that was in Edwardian Elizabethan times. However, it's
Elizabethan,
not Elizabethan. What's that? Anyway, 1800s.
Edwardian,
Victorian. Thank you. I don't know why I said Elizabethan. I apologize.
Yeah, Regency, Victorian, Edwardian, Georgian.
Okay, but it harkens back to the 1800s. So it draws its inspiration from there, and we've talked about that multiple times. Of all tradition, all things you have to have the tradition to draw from, or else it all means nothing. So it needs to exist. I think we can all agree with that, or else it all just kind of becomes a plaything and it all goes away and all meaning goes out of it.
Speaking of which, I want to propose a new tradition. And by this, of course, I mean a new product. Coming to USA Kilt's website this fall, just in time for Oktoberfest, German Heritage Tartan Lederhosen. What do you think of that?
It looked like a romper.
It would. It would.
Yeah.
You go right ahead. You have fun, big boy.
Just don't wear it at work, right?
I don't care if you wear it at work. I'm fine with that. But it's a romper, and it would be therefore trendy.
I'll also get you a matching bonnet and binky for that, Ian.
I didn't say I was going to wear it.
The
binky,
yes, because there are people who wear rompers to raves, so that makes sense. The bonnet, I'm not so sure.
Who do you think's going to model it on the website there, Chief?
Ay. So, I mean, you said you have to have the core tradition, otherwise you don't know what you're looking back to. Is that what you're saying?
You have to always have the core tradition. There is a need for people to carry on the core of the tradition, and you have to keep that in mind as you move forward, as a group, not any one individual, but as a group, because any changes that are made or any tweaks to it have to pull from that. It can't, if it goes too far off the reservation, it is then a different thing. So it has to be tweaks to the original and an evolution of the original, not just a whole new thing.
Are you saying we need snobs and gatekeepers?
They serve a purpose.
Is it possible to be a guardian of tradition without being a jerk, without being a stick in the mud?
It is. Can you be a historian without being a jerk about, pointing out every single thing that every single person says wrong, like Edwardian versus Elizabethan, Eric?
The term you want is pedantic.
So yes, it's
actually, I think the word that you
actually,
the two are not mutually exclusive. You can be one and the other. You can be kind candor, if you will. You can, give people information without being a jerk about it. You have to have a temperament for it, though. You have to choose your words carefully and make, want your end goal to be, I don't want to offend this person or hurt this person's feelings, but I want to educate them. So, yes.
Certainly not everybody has that skill.
Nope.
Mm-hmm. So is there a sweet spot for those of us, especially who are serial kilters? Is there a sweet spot between being a gatekeeper? I use the term snob, but I'm just being, devil's advocate here. I'm not trying to actually call people snobs, but a gatekeeper, a guardian of tradition, shall we say, a bluffo traditionalist, and being casual. I mean, how do you tell if you choose not to be totally within the ivory tower? How do you tell when you've gone too far, or does it matter?
I don't think.
Or is that a peer pressure thing?
Yeah, I don't think you can tell. I think either it's your gut. Period. If it's like you have to, as a consumer, you're getting into the space, and why are you getting into the space? Are you getting into it to kilts? Are you getting into it to experience in your heritage and your tradition? Are you doing it because you just love wearing skirts and you want to try a kilt? Are you wearing it because it's whatever the reason is? It's
could be both them.
Exactly.
It can be.
Understood. But it depends on how you get there, and then how much education you want and how much you are willing to educate yourself within it as you move on your own personal journey. So are you just, nope, I just want to have fun with it because it's fun attention thing and I'm using it in that way, versus, no, I really want to honor my heritage. I want to learn more about this. I want to understand the right, air quotes, and wrong way to do things and the traditional way to do things. And then I think, honestly, most people probably evolve.
Yeah.
It's you don't generally walk into it, first toe in the water is a full traditional outfit head to toe. That very, very, very rarely happens.
I don't know. I might argue that, but go ahead.
It depends on where you were brought up. Are you brought up in a family and a father who's a traditional kilt wearer and shows you how to do it, but then you've already had your education built in. So before you even got into it. So it's a matter of, I think, the vast majority of people, especially in the diaspora, who did not grow up in it, who are trying to educate themselves because they want to do a good job and look good, start off, kind of going to a Ren Fair or Celtic festival, buying something, walking around, and then going like, that guy looks better than me. Let me talk to him, or let me like try to emulate that look a little bit. And then you see someone else, and then you find a Facebook group, and then you see some videos from a great company on YouTube, and you kind of, you play around within it, and you evolve over time. I sure as hell did.
Mm-hmm.
I did too, but I think we do have people who actually are kind of the exact opposite of what you said, is that they come into it and they go for the most traditional thing they can afford because they are absolutely dedicated to making sure they are representing the tradition and heritage correctly, and they really got to stick up their butt about it. Yeah. Or they're terrified. Like it's for a wedding, their first kilt. Think about it this way, the guy who buys his first kilt for his wedding, it's got to be perfect. Is this the right thing to wear with this? Yes or no? I mean, we get those questions all the time. So I think you have that, and then people finally start to relax and then get more casual afterwards. So I think it could go either way.
And how many times have we gotten a question for our live show that's like, if I'm wearing the wrong Clance tartan, will people fight me in the street?
Right.
Right. Yes.
So it's clearly a fear some people have,
I think it definitely is. I think it definitely can be.
Yeah. I think to go back to your question about whether somebody's being a snob versus being a guardian of culture in a positive way, really kind of depends on the context of the situation too. If you're at a St. Andrew's Society dinner, there are some more firm boundaries on what is right versus what is wrong. Mm-hmm. That tartan tweed Sheriff Muir everybody might look at him and go, that's wrong. Depending on the group, I'm sure there's varying degrees of this at various different St. Andrews groups across the country. But then, at the rock festival, you see the guy, and if you're giving him the same, like if you pull a guy aside at St. Andrews side and you're like, hey, by the way, your kilt's on a little sideways. Can I help you with that? He wants to wear it. At the rock festival, who cares? Like you're just being a snob if you're trying to correct somebody's outfit when they're, they're wearing their Megadeth shirt and their casual kilt.
So you're saying if I, as somebody critiquing something, I should be aware of the context.
Yes.
Choose your battles.
Yes.
Kind of thing.
How traditional is the event you're going to begin with?
Mm-hmm. Now, what if they're wearing their kilt backwards with that Megadeth t-shirt?
Backwards is clearly wrong. If you're trying to if you're trying to zip up your zipper in your jeans from the back, unless it's some kind of weird variation on jeans, you're clearly doing it wrong. Now, if it's a little crooked, okay, it's a little crooked. Maybe you're going for a little bit of an unkempt look, or maybe you didn't quite know. And frankly, I'm not going to bother you about it at the festival. But if I know, me and my buddy are about to go to a St. Andrew's Society dinner, it's his first time wearing a kilt, and he's looking a little unkempt. I'm like, hey, buddy, let me help you fix that out. As long as you can do that in a kind way, then it's being a guardian of the culture in a very positive way. Mm-hmm. But if you're just like picking out a stranger in a crowd and be like, you're doing it wrong, stop that, then you've crossed a line.
Yep.
So it basically comes down to if you win. Because my
does it come from a place of kindness? Is it looking inward?
Yeah, I was going back to something else, but go ahead.
If you're looking at your tribe inwardly and saying, here's how we do things, it's one thing versus, looking at people and saying they're not, they're doing it wrong. That's a different kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But sorry,
no, it's okay. Because I'm a nerd, everything always makes me think of stories. And there's, it's before your time, but the miniseries Shogun, okay, from like the early '80s. You have this Dutch sailor or this English sailor who winds up stranded in Japan, and he's taken to see the warlord, and through an interpreter, he's trying to explain who he is and what he is, and the warlord is basically saying, you're a pirate. He's like, no, we're not pirates. We're revolutionaries. We're fighting for, for freedom from tyranny. And he says, then you are a rebel. There can be no excuse for a citizen rebelling against their sovereign lord. You're nothing but a criminal. And the Englishman says in return, unless you win. And of course, the warlord laughs and they become friends. And so I think that's the point with this whole thing with tradition, is that I can say that it is now going to be tradition that you wear a kilt that's only 10 inches long. Okay.
I've got a picture of Matt that you might want to see.
No.
And I will either, and it's like, it's like, I'll be laughed at and mocked. But if a few people start to think it's cool over time and it starts to become popular, then I win. And then it eventually becomes accepted as tradition.
It's the old histories written by the winners thing.
Kinda.
Yeah.
I mean, because again, how else do you explain Gillybrogues? They're clearly manufactured as this pastiche, okay? There's no reason for them. You know, it's like, oh, the symbolism, blah, 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 blah. But they have stuck around because they're okay. So, I mean, is really just, is winning the only thing that really matters when it comes to maintaining a tradition?
100 years from now, the blood right of the Skindu is going to be in history books.
Oh, you have to bring that up again.
No, I will burn them all. Maybe book burning isn't. Maybe book burning isn't a good visual.
I just want to write the song. Yeah, blood right of the Skindu. I get a Sabaton kind of vibe going with that.
It's got an 80s, operatic metal vibe. Yes.
Yep. I mean, does it tradition? Is it even possible to have an ugly tradition?
Yes. Laterism.
Well, that's my point.
A perspective thing. There are some people who think kilts are ugly. They're wrong, to be clear, but
yeah, it's like the honor guards in Athens who wear that uniform with the skirt like kilt like thing and the shoes with the big pom poms on them.
Mm-hmm.
That apparently, I didn't realize this. That didn't exist before like the mid 19th century, possibly even later. It's a very, very recent invention, and it was invented as, we don't have a strong national dress like these other people do. Hey, there are these shepherds out there in the hills who wear this thing sometimes. Let's use that and make that the uniform for the honor guard.
Mm-hmm.
And it stuck. Now, if anybody's Greek out there, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what I think I've heard. So, I mean, it's a tradition. I don't see people on the streets of Athens wearing little, fluffy mini skirts and shoes with pom-poms on them, though.
There's something to be said for acceptance by the establishment for a tradition to stick.
But that is,
and that is
enforced by the establishment even.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Whereas kilts had to overcome that a bit.
But is it a strong tradition even though it's ugly? Or do we have a stronger tradition because the aesthetic is accepted?
The world may never know.
It's stronger the better the aesthetic is.
Yeah.
If it's ugly, less people are going to want to do the thing. So, like, come on, kid, get dressed up in this. No, I don't want to. Why? It looks stupid. It's the old Ralphie and the bunny costume coming down the stairs.
Mm-hmm. For the record, I'm not saying that the Greek uniform looks ugly.
I've never seen it, so I'm speaking out of turn. But if it looks, dumb to the majority of people, then it won't stick and it won't be a thing, or it'll evolve much quicker. Mm-hmm. And someone will say, like, if it's a big pom-pom on the shoe and it's impractical and it gets dirty and whatever, then somebody goes, I'm going to do the same outfit, but I'm taking the pom-pom off the shoe. Yeah. And that will evolve because it looks less stupid than big shoes with a big pom-pom on it. Yeah, but if I'm viewing them properly.
Buckle brogues are more practical than ghillie brogues, Rocky.
Day brogues are more practical than both because the buckle brogues are just a big freaking buckle sewn on there. It doesn't really do much.
Well, I'm in favor of 18th century actual buckle brogues where the buckle is functional.
Yes, indeed. Yes, so don't wear any orthotics in that because that wouldn't be traditional.
Right, no, exactly. No, but
you must wear a leather bottom, flat, with nails sticking into the bottom of your foot. Yes,
absolutely. But you're also talking to somebody who went bowling last weekend and was really tempted to walk home with those bowling shoes. So the tangent, but okay. So
good pair of red and blue bowling shoes would go great with the American Dream tartan.
I had a vision in my head of
no, we are not selling these either
as a punk rock thing. I was like, I'm not 16. I can't steal bowling shoes.
Not with that attitude.
Maybe I can purchase them. Good, sir.
You probably could. I don't know if you'd want them by the time they're on the market, though.
Pretty much.
A little Lysol, maybe. But so, go ahead.
I just think related to that, the Greek example. What sticks faster, a top-down tradition or a bottom-up tradition?
I was going to ask that earlier,
kilts are bottom-up, especially given that they did attempt to stamp it out a little bit at times.
I think they're both. Kilts are weird because I think they're both.
Yeah, it's certainly different time periods and different movements, yes. Mm-hmm. But at times it is only carried through because there were people at the bottom trying to maintain it. Whereas it sounds, if I take at your word, I'm obviously also not a history in Greek, modern Greek history, but if that was a very top-down kind of a thing, you're right, it could go away very suddenly just because you have a new, I don't know if it's political leader, a military leader, or just the leader of the honor guard who decides, like you said, drop the pom-pom. We're gonna keep some elements, the intricate lace work or whatever. I don't know what the shoes look like, but we're going to keep a lot of it, but we're losing the pom-pom. It's immediately gone in 10 minutes, especially if it's not something being worn outside of that honor guard.
The kilts were kind of both, where it was very much bottom up. It was common clothing. It was what was worn in the Highlands. And then after prescriptions, and it kind of, it obviously went away, the vast majority of this stuff.
But brought back.
Brought back, yes, but never regained full popularity. And then of what it had pre-prescription. Then when Sir Walter Scott kind of, and a small group kind of came, Sir Walter Scott romanticized the hell out of Scotland. And he, wanted to ensure the enshrining of the culture to make sure it was not lost. He's a very, very interesting guy where he was like very loyal to the crown, but at the same time loved Scotland and really wanted Scottish culture to flourish. So he basically saw it as his job to marry those two things and be like, okay, well, we need a big thing to get this moving again to make sure it doesn't go anywhere. So the king, the establishment of establishments, he got him to do this whole big thing in 1822. And so it was a top down to some degree at that point, but in a way that the bottom up couldn't have been, because it was a common man's thing, not a hoity-toity thing.
But it was a top-down resurgence, not a top-down creation, the way this Greek...
I'd say top-down resuscitation.
Resuscitation.
Yeah, and that's interesting.
But if the bottom didn't carry it to at least a minor degree, it couldn't have been picked back up from the top.
Yep.
I was going to say, just to be pedantic, the tartan craze did actually predate Scott, but it was actually in some ways stronger outside of Scotland. And it was because of him and similar writers romanticizing the now defeated and therefore harmless and therefore we can feel safe playing with it Scottish culture. So people in England actually picked up on
the London
stuff.
Scottish Society.
And then Scott was kind of like the king of making that actually work. So I would say I think what you could argue is that the kilt was a clothing of a nationality. But it was not a national dress. What Scott and his ilk did was they invented the national dress to say that this is the symbolic outfit of a Scot. A kilt, a jacket like this, kilt hose, a sporran, these weapons, this sort of hat. They invented the whole uniform. And that's kind of, I think, the difference is as opposed to just like, well, here's my shirt, here's my shoes, but I'm wearing a kilt because I'm going up in the hills today. Which is what started off as. So here's my question. Is the other thing the tradition benefits from and that really needs is the shortbread box. Do you need the cliche? Do you need the cartoon? Do you need that simplified vision of what it is in order for it to stick in people's minds to keep it at top of mind, as we say in marketing?
Yes. And just to reopen back the last point you just made, I will also point out that even as Scott and his ilk invented the tradition to some degree, or expounded greatly upon the tradition.
They made a whole big thing is what they did.
Exactly. But even then, what they invented and what existed through the let's say 1860s, 1870s is different than what it evolved into in the 1900 to 1930s. So, and that is kind of today what is looked at as traditional Highland dress is what was codified in the 1920s, essentially. And if you would look at the stuff from the 1850s, that's stuffy old stuff. This is the new trend. This is what's in. This is the wide lapels on the Prince Charlie, which is a brand new jacket style.
Right.
So
and you don't have to have a goat hair sporran down to your knees.
Correct.
Yeah.
So it's still evolved, again, sort of slowly, but it still has evolved into that. And I find it, kind of amusing that that's kind of where it stopped. I completely forget your other point where you were making and we're going with it.
I think that gets into all sorts of tangents about like technology and lifestyle and what's practical and impractical to wear.
And what the rest of society is wearing. So you look closely akin, but still different.
Again, so the difference between a national dress, which is a national fashion or a nationally derived fashion versus a national dress uniform, a la the Greek honor guards, that nobody wears except for, or lederhosen, nobody wears except for a special occasion. So my question was, do we actually need those cliches to look back on and to remind us of what this idea, this mythic ideal is? How much is a mythic ideal? How much is the Victorian era style bagpiper on the shortbread box? How important is he as an icon to remind us, yes, that's what this is coming from. This is the easy image I can give to my kids.
I would take exception to the term ideal. I would say as a reminder of where it started, or a reminder of this snapshot moment of time, or a reminder of this tradition within it. But I would not say it's an ideal. I would say, here's a thing as it was, and is shown beautifully for that moment in time.
Yeah.
And then when you look at the catalogs from the 1920s and the 1930s, the old, hand-drawn, hand-colored, catalogs from retailers showing different things, like they're super cool to look at now, like, wow. And it feels so 20s and so 30s when you look at that stuff versus the things that are put out today. So it's important to have those snapshots in time so you can trace the history, but not get stuck in it.
Yeah. Knowing that stuff is being a good student of the tradition. But saying it can only be like that is that gatekeepery type instinct. That,
I agree.
That we were referring to earlier.
Let me give you another one. I think I know what the answer to this is going to be is, how do you feel, or how do you think people in general feel about a tradition that comes from a flawed source or a flawed beginning?
Are we talking about Gilly Brogues again?
No. Let me finish. There can be, there's some very dark examples where things which became tradition because they're part of a culture that was actually, a negative part of a culture, like imperialism or slavery. But there's also more benign, but also sources for things like, I would argue that if it weren't for the movie Braveheart, which we know is flawed in many, 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 many ways, I would argue that in some ways there wouldn't be nearly as many people with Celtic tattoos now, especially blue-black tattoos, if it hadn't been for that movie showing guys wearing woad in battle. So you have a flawed source, which I think has
Or guys wearing kilts.
Or guys wearing kilts. But I thought the tattoos was an interesting nuance, actually.
Yeah.
We'll point out a couple of flaws before we get into this. Braveheart, Mel Gibson, wanted there to be kilts in the movie, but William Wallace would not have worn a kilt. It was post his time. The blue face paint, it was Pictish. It's a thing, but it wasn't necessarily the thing.
Nope, not at that point.
Going forward on the timeline. Not 1995, but in old-timey timeline. You have, again, Sir Walter Scott inventing the thing, but for the best of reasons. Going forward from there, you have the Sobieski Stuarts with the Vestiarum Scoticum inventing tartans that are now fully accepted as clan tartans, which were just made up and shoved down people's throats and said, yep. Or if you don't want to say shoved down people's throats, it's clan chiefs saying, yep, that looks good. I'm done. Yep, that's the one, and just accepting it blindly. So I think that may be part of the question is, how do you accept it? Do you accept it blindly or with a skeptical eye?
And whether or not you accept it is more important than why you accepted it. And as far as it becoming a tradition, the root question we started with.
So like, it's kind of like death of the author.
I think
there's a death of the author factor to this. If you like the result, you're not going to worry about the source so much.
I'm saying you shouldn't worry about it or ever discuss it, but whether or not it became accepted as a tradition is somewhat, that is irrelevant to that question is all I'm saying. Okay. So it's kind of like a similar discussion we've had multiple times over in the shop about language use and how many times does somebody use a word incorrectly before the dictionary just acknowledges the incorrect meaning of the word. You know what I mean? It happens all the time and it's similar.
Too often.
Evolution of language.
Yeah. Don't get me started on decimation.
Yes.
Nobody uses that word correctly and it's just now accepted.
I agree. It bugs me too.
Ian,
it's the same kind of thing though.
That response to that decimates me.
But it's not even the not even the correct wrong way to use it.
Well, I think you just hit on a really, really good metaphor though. Is tradition a language?
Well, before we get off of the other.
Come on, man. I'm full of caffeine. I'm going.
It's the question becomes, how is it important? Why is it important? with like the origins of it. I think it is important to catalog it and to have a firm and very factual, accounting for particular things and how the thing evolved. That is the thing, like personally for me, that grinds my gears. The thing that bugs me about kilts, which will probably never be answered, is like, who did the first kilt? How did it evolve? And having better historical evidence, because it's just not there. Part of the reason why we are doing things that we are doing here with interviewing particular people is to catalog certain facts that have existed or evolved within the last 20, 30, 40 years that we know people, and people that we know have been in the industry and been in this culture, to be able to say these things existed in this order, this is how it was, to sort of dispel the BS myths that come out of it and to give more truth to it, so that in 100 years people can go back, or 200 years or whatever, and say, okay, well, the origins were murky, but from this point on we have better facts, and here is how they are laid out, here's the timeline, and here's how things evolved. That's my lesson for today.
I grok, man.
Here into the lesson.
I grok. I really like the idea of tradition as a language.
Yeah, it's a visual language. Well, at least if far as kilts and fashion related traditions go.
But bottom line is, as fashion or other stuff, it is a way of communicating with people.
Yeah, it's how we speak about our culture and our history and all those things.
Yeah,
albeit not necessarily always with words.
And it's a way of framing things too, and knowing the origins is essential, like you said. So
yep,
I think that's what.
I was gonna say, but like anything, it has to evolve. There has to be personal expression, and it's always that balance. It's always the opposing forces pulling at either end of it that are needed to guide the center path.
Even if they're somewhat
in
fictional.
your opinion.
Yes.
Yeah. Even if they're semi-fictional.
Yeah. Like how many times have we seen within our own lifetimes a book or a movie came out, and then there's a whole spurt of kids all named after one of the characters. How many Bellas are there? How many Lilies anymore?
Wasn't it the name Wendy that didn't exist before Peter Pan?
I have no idea. I believe it, but
on that note, gentlemen, I'm going to say this is a really good discussion.
Yeah.
I think we left some unanswered questions a little bit for fun and a lot of things for people to think about. I'm really looking forward to seeing and reading the comments. So those of you out there who see/listen to this, I'm a mess. I'm very interested to know what you think, and it could lead to other discussions that we have. So let fly. I want to hear what you think. Right.
And if there's any other topics that you want to hear us kind of wax poetic about, drop them down there as well.
Right on.
And get in your pre-orders for the Tartan Lederhosen.
It's a romper. I'm telling you, it's a freaking romper. And I'm so photoshopping you into one now.
Oh, damn it.
You always forget.
I've made a tactical error here.
Yes, you have.
Man.
Yes, you have.
I think Matt would look better in the Tartan Lederhosen.
Nope, it's all you. So tune in next time, boys and girls, for Ian. He's actually going to wear one on the next show. Tune in next time for Ian in a tartan romper.
On Haggis Hunting. Thanks. Slantrava.
Slange.
Thanks for watching the video, guys. Remember, if you want to support our channel, we actually have a real store over in Spring City, PA. If you have anything you need for your Highland wear outfit, go over to usakilts.com.